y'all. It's Uppity Unicorn, and I'm here today to talk to you about Ken and Marquez from Love and Marriage Huntsville. I guess my ultimate question is, how far would you go behind your kids? Question mark. Okay. It seems to me that Marquez and what's the girl's name? Latricia. Marquez and Latricia are pretty boring. They're pretty boring to watch on TV. I remember when Trisha first hit the scene, we couldn't get her to divide her top and bottom row of teeth. We couldn't get her to do anything but speak through her teeth. She didn't want to talk. It's like she didn't want to film scenes. It's like Ken kind of had to goad her. And we do know that in Ken's past, he was some kind of stunt double slash Z-list actor, something of the sort. So these are a couple of people with great bodies who want them to be seen, who want to be seen. And Marquez just hits me as really vulnerable. I remember when he had his mom praying for Dr. Heavenly, and how his grandmother or his mom, I believe it was his grandmother actually, had to pray over him before he went live. The genuineness, and shout out to Melody, whoop whoop. Just the genuine giddiness. There are some men, like Marceau, they would never whoop whoop. They would just, try to play hard, or try to play up a facade to make you think that they are something that they're not. I mean, case in point, Martell Holt, right? Always wearing a suit, always playing up something. Remember when, when he was walking around with that empty piece of paper and a pencil in front of Melnika, and she was like, "You working?" He's like, "Not really." Like, "Fool, not at all. You just walked out there with a piece of paper and a pencil so you could look like something. Why do you have props? Why do you have props?" So yeah, I can't give you no props for them props. But anyhow, Ken seems to know, if he's going to play it up, or if he needs to create some drama, he can play with vulnerable Marquez, very vulnerable Marquez, and manipulate him through his feelings by talking about his kids online. And Trisha seems to like it. Um, the great big conversation is, I guess Ken can't have kids. And people talk a lot about women who can't have kids, but I have learned that some women, like even women that I know, they're very, very fertile, but the men that they are married to, the little soldiers just aren't marching. They're just not doing that, whether they took too much creatine, they were bodybuilders, they took hormones that messed up, how their seminal fluids chase or don't chase very long an egg. So there's just lots of things going on in lots of people's lives, but it made me realize maybe this is why Ken keeps confiscating kids. Like, he has that daughter that he claims from his previous relationship, and obviously Latricia's children. And it's starting to make sense, because first I thought that there was something weird and groomy about it. And we can get into that, because Marquez definitely called Ken Diddy. And, I don't know what that means, because that could mean that, Ken likes men. That could mean that he roofies women. That could mean that he deals with workers who are escorts and below. Um, that could mean a lot, but it could also mean, Diddy's been hit with accusations by people as young as 13 years old. And you have, um, Orlando. I want to call him Orlando Bloom so bad, and that's not his name. That's the guy from The Hobbit, but Orlando Tyga from Major Pain. It seems like he's been watching this Diddy thing go down since he was a small child. So there are also those implications, and I hope that that's not the case. I hope that's not the case. I remember discussing a picture of Marquez's daughter, and Ken, and they are growing to growing. And I know that like that doesn't have to be intentional. I'm sure it wasn't intentional for the daughter. I'm sure it wasn't intentional for Ken, but the picture gave inappropriate. Okay. So I hope that's not the case. I hope that's not what Marquez was saying, but maybe he was saying some of the other stuff because obviously the great big proof that we have on Diddy is him putting his hands on Cassie. So maybe he is calling Ken a womanizer of sorts, maybe a maybe a DV kind of guy. Excuse me. Mm, Sorry, I am recording. It's about 7 a.m. It's actually 7:10 a.m. in the Pacific Northwest as I'm recording this video, and I have not had my coffee. So, pardon my yawning. But I want to get back to the point of how far would you go about your kids? Anytime somebody's talking about your kids online, bothering your kids, bullying your kids, using your kids to promote themselves, whatever it is, right? And I've even seen, Ariane using the Eminem kids to promote herself. And Melody, she's a veteran in this game and she's mature about how to move in public. And I know that she can afford a legal team to do, to prosecute these people to the furthest extent of the law. And I'm happy for her with that. But Marquez doesn't necessarily have the same thing or the same resources. And obviously, it's just a different dynamic when you're men going back and forth as opposed to women going back and forth. And sometimes for a man, it makes you look like you're not present or you're a punk or whatever, in the eyes of your child. And sometimes you have to respond. But I guess saying outing Ken as a man who cannot have children, obviously, because I mean, if Marquez knows that, it's only because Latricia was pillow talking. If he knows that about him to be true, and again, all views shared here in this video are alleged, and in my opinion, for entertainment purposes only. If he knows that, it's only because Trish told him. It's not because of anything else. But I mean, the conversation is that too harsh? Because you have people who make fun of women who can't have kids. I know. When I was being dragged on YouTube, they were like, "That bitch is barren, blah, 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 blah." And I'm just like, well, actually, I'm extremely fertile. I have high risk pregnancies. My first son, or well, my only child that I ever brought to term was stillborn. He suffocated to death. I had full term preeclampsia and I hemorrhaged. I split down the middle of my womb when I had my first big contraction that wasn't Braxton Hicks. And basically, my womb split, the placenta split, and the way the human body works, it just, yeah, it's actually a really gruesome story. My son, when he came out, his whole face was blue. His entire face was blue, like he suffocated to death. And on YouTube, and Black women's empowerment spaces and the manosphere, like people thought that this was funny, and they used it to talk crazy to me. And I know that's the first time that's probably the first time I went to the cemetery and conjured. It's the first time that I went and started making my Bawon Cimetière sigils and Papa Legba. And like you can click off my channel because of New Orleans voodoo and hoodoo, or you can understand that a mother will go to the ends of the earth for her child. Now I'm a mother bereaved, but I'm always going to be a mother. I had a handful of other very unsafe pregnancies and miscarriages and ectopic pregnancies, which can only be solved, one way. Um, but it was just, people would say things about my son, like, "Oh, had he lived, he would have been a retarded motherfucker like his mom," and she made that little nigga up and he don't really exist. And I remember getting online with his death certificate and showing his footprints. This is a much younger uppity. Okay. This is a much less mature uppity. This was an uppity who had never been dragged online before. This is an uppity who, that was my first time having tens of thousands of people, and I do mean tens of thousands of people because one of the women who led the charge against me had like at least, at least 100,000 subscribers, if not more. You'd be surprised at what people can be, envious of. Anyhow, um, some raggedy dusty men were attracted to me, and that infuriated all the women who talk about dusties all day when in reality that's their type, and I bore the brunt of that. But the first time I laid curses on people, went to the cemetery after night, well, it wasn't the first time I went to the cemetery after dark, but I was very religious before then, and them talking about my son and his death broke my mind in a way where it broke barriers for me. Right? This is a personal testimony. It broke barriers for me. I started to do that which I wouldn't normally do. And so, my question is, how far would you go? Especially if you know these are people like this happened during Mr. Uppity's lifetime, and I would try to get him to, take me to where these people lived. I found their addresses, and like I really wasn't playing, you guys. And that's my deceased son. So how much more when somebody's playing with your living kids? Everybody who is a parent, everybody who's a loving, involved parent, everybody who has given their blood and their bones and their health to produce a kid. I'm calling on you. I'm asking you a question. How far would you go? So the thing is now, because I went through what I went through online, like it's like how you see Sunny freaking out, right? Sunny was freaking out for so long because she'd never been dragged like that on the internet before. But once you've been dragged to hell, and I do mean to hell, if you make it after that, because some people just quit YouTube, they quit social media, they get out of there. But once you've been dragged to hell and you resurrect from that grave, like nothing is going to hurt you. I had the thinnest skin of anyone, almost anyone I'd ever met. I can think of people with thinner skin, but hypersensitive, totally emotional, very, very soft. I grew up Kojic and sheltered. People with experiences with, just uh, poor parentage. I have a great matriarch in my life. My parents divorced young, but I just had a good upbringing, so I wasn't used to these kind of things. And so even when I would fight with these people, even by the time I went to the cemetery and I started conjuring and whatever else, I was just like, I can't put my mouth on your kids. It was just a barrier. And I know people are like, how are you out here, conjuring ancestors, but you can't put your the answer is I just think one is worse than the other. I think when you put your mouth on somebody's kids, you're calling death into your life. And I don't make any apology for that. If you start talking about somebody's kids, you calling them ugly, fat, you can't grow no hair the way Wanda was doing with the Eminem kids. Like if there's anybody to live, to fight, to die for, to kill for, excuse my language, I'll probably have to censor this video. It's your kids. In my case, lucky for me, my mother as well. But I'm just like, my siblings, their kids, my son, my mom, like they are so off limits. And the things I will do to get listen, um, I have matured since then, but I'm telling you the catalyst to me being brave enough to go digging in a cemetery and burying these people in jars, the catalyst for me to be brave enough and motivated enough because it's scary. If you're in your right mind, cemeteries are unnerving. Now I'd been so much, I'm more than comfortable now. But like during the process, I was outside of my right mind because, like trying to using the love of my life. And even when Mr. Uppity died, there was this great big party. They're like, yeah, because people can be really rotten. And that's why I don't trust or support any of those spaces. I listen to Chrissy and I listen to Kimberly Foster, but I don't take those spaces seriously. I don't believe in any of those content creators in those sectors because the way these women will turn on you for a dusty you've never met is unbelievable. The things they will drag you through for some online dusty who thinks you're cute is unbelievable, and you would only know it if you've seen it. Um, I know there are people in this sector like our girl Smart Cookie and the Black Bumblebee who watched me go through that. A lot of people in the love and marriage Huntsville sector don't know anything about that, but they're still cool with me and down with me to this day because they're just like, I don't know who else could have survived that. Because it was to the point where these people were trying to get me unalived over, some small group of men who tried to pick me. I think every now and then there's a manosphere sweetheart. And when men get a load of you, sometimes they want to make you one. And obviously, I would decline something like that because of what my values are. And when you reject people, people can become resentful. And when everybody is picking you in a room full of pick me's and a chat room full of pick me's, people get really mad. Um, Anyhow, that's a long, nasty story. But the point that I'm making is that Ken was not, or excuse me, Marquez was not in the wrong for being like, yeah, you want to claim my kids because you can't have any. You want to talk about my kids. You want to be there for everybody else's kids because you don't have any. You can't. Infertility is a soft spot, but so is people's kids. And I think people's living, breathing kids are a bigger soft spot than your infertility. That's what I believe. And I'm not sorry about that. I don't make any apologies about that. Like it just is what it is. By the time you get online and you start using my kids as a pawn in your game, it's over. All things go. And Mr. Uppity used to be so shocked at me. He's just like, my sweet girl. Like, no one would ever guess. Because people, found me to be an easy target. And he was just like, no one would ever guess that you got that dog in you. And Mr. Uppity was member of Omega Psi Phi. So for an Omega to tell you you got that dog in you is severe. Um, but he might life with him was so good. He might take me on like a shopping spree or something to forget about it, or get me a really big gift, or give my mom a gift and just, make me all pink inside again. And I would, kind of let it go. But his love definitely carried me through that period of time. Um, yeah. So these days I wouldn't have to go that far. I wouldn't have to like I'm telling you, when I was digging in that cemetery and saying my little chants, I went against everything that I believed in for revenge. I went against everything that I was raised with as a Kojic woman that I converted to Islam over blah blah blah. Um, I went against everything I believed in for the sake of you. You got to keep your mouth off my kid. You got to do it. And my thing is, I wasn't asking anything of anyone that I wouldn't ask of myself because I kept my mouth off their kids and they're adult kids, right? Because one of these people were like grandparents. They were a lot older than I was. And I'm just like, your kids are my peers. And I can't bring myself because I feel like whatever a parent does to you after you going on their kid is you asked for it. You have asked for that scythe. You really have. You gotta not take it that far. That's why when what is it? When Stormy sat there and said Mel holds the most grudges, I'm like, these people ganged up on her kid. It's not a grudge, it's a burned bridge. You can never get back across. Like, I don't know if you guys saw my content from then, but I was pissed. Oh, Sugar Mama's paternity, and oh, those kids, don't got no good hair, and they would cut Marcel and Letitia's kids' hair off because it's longer and better than theirs. But what? I mean, child. Me and my poor sisters, we normally there's a sister to help you calm down, or it's not worth it. Me and my sisters would be like, let's do it. If you do it, I'm gonna do it. Like like who got what to say about my niece, about my nephew? And my niece is rude. My niece is rude, but I'm like, who got what to say? That song, "Damn, that's evil twin." That means we evil then. Evil twin. Nope. If you slap that hoe, Imma slap that hoe. If you stomp that hoe, Imma stomp that hoe. Like, I'm a really sweet, goofy, autistic person, but I'm about 6 foot, 200 pounds. And I wouldn't have lived through life if I couldn't fight and if my body wasn't as strong as it is. I wouldn't have survived because my personality is too small. So when I had all that physical rage and people were like talking about I mean, my poor little boy ain't did nothing to nobody. But you're using him as a pawn and uploading videos about my deceased son. Like, I got energy for that. And if I can't find you, I got energy to send to you. After Mr. Uppity saw what I pulled, he was like, "Yeah, these Santa Muerte statues gotta go." He was like, "She gotta go." And Imma just leave it at that. Actually, no, I'm not gonna leave it at that. Um, the Santa Muerte is responsive and faithful. So, that's what I'll say about that. And I have to say that because there was never a request that I made that she didn't respond to. Um, but some people are gifted in that way. Some people are gifted spiritually. And I think a lot of autistic people are gifted spiritually. And when we call to the heavens, when we call on anything, like you couldn't put me in front of a Ouija board unless you really want to get scared. I'm telling you, whenever I'm around, I'm like a living, breathing talisman. I'm like a living, breathing, like things will happen. Things will happen. So if you're into spooky, spooky, I'm your girl. If you're not, don't worry. This channel ain't about that. But what I'm saying with my story is that I empathize with Marquez. I empathize with Marquez, and I think it's silly not to, especially if you're a parent, especially if you're a parent fighting for your kids. Obviously, Marquez doesn't have what Ken has, not in terms of money, not in terms of body. I mean, Ken can obviously beat up Marquez. And that doesn't mean Marquez has to fear him, but it's just like when two men are getting into it, there's very quick, either we're gonna box it out or somebody's gonna get Pum pum, ra-ta-ta-ta, like, so it's like you have to tread really lightly because it's only a few steps before the final step. I want to close out like this. Speaking of final steps, Mama Uppity is cancer free. However, she does have stem cell bone marrow transplant treatment coming up in December. And so, what they do is they give her the lowest, like a very low chemo shot. Uh, until she finally gets to do the bone marrow stem cell transplant. So they do that to keep her at remission and to make sure that she remains a candidate for the stem cell bone marrow transplant. So the GoFundMe is still up for that final step. These aren't next steps, these are final steps. This is completion. So we've been celebrating, but if there's anything on your heart to give, to share, go on ahead and do it. The link is in the description box below. But I need to hear parents. I don't want to hear from people who don't have kids. I really don't. I want to hear from you as parents. How far would you go behind your kid? And don't think I'm a judge you if you say I wouldn't do all what Marquez is doing or saying, because honestly, me sitting here as a mature uppity unicorn, as an uppity unicorn who has finally grown a few gray strands of hair, I wouldn't behave today the way that I behaved yesterday. I wouldn't be in a cemetery dealing with some of the most dangerous loa that exist. I had no idea how dangerous the Baron of the cemetery could be. I had no idea how dangerous the Baron Samedi could be. I had no idea. I was deep in my hoodoo research. I was buying book after book after book, Haitian voodoo, New Orleans voodoo. Like I was deep in my revenge bag, and in the process, I educated myself, and I could have died in the process. Like there's that white girl who went viral for trying to conjure, and that's so weird. She was trying to conjure Papa Legba against her African American roommate. And I'm just like, this is a closed practice for a reason, and you're conjuring the people who protected us from your people. Does that make sense to you? But she left some morbid tweets like, oh, I see him, I see him, I see him, and then she passed away. And I'm like, you can't conjure people's people against them. That's not how that works. You can't conjure people's spirits and ancestral familiar spirits against them. What? Anyhow, I'll say this about that because I know it's a curious thing. If your cause is not righteous, if they search you and you are asking for something that is unjust, it'll just flip to you. So let's say if the people who were in the wrong, they tried to do the same thing to me, they would just get what they were looking for to come to me, to them. And so lucky for me, thank God for a pure heart. I can't say clean hands, pure heart, because them hands is full of cemetery dirt. But I thank God for a clean heart because I have scales. People say Libras hold the scales, but you really ought to look into what an Aries is like. I have thick scales of justice, and I may not always do mercy, but I always do justice to people. And I'm grateful for that as a quality because it has made me a spiritual powerhouse. And anywhere you find me, anywhere you put me, if you put me in a Kojic church, if you put me in a Muslim mosque, if you put me in a Buddhist temple, if you put me in a Hindu temple, anywhere you put me, I can plug and I can tune into whatever deity. And that's not something everybody can say. So I am grateful to be such a spiritually attuned tool. Um, and oftentimes justice comes through me. Anyhow, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up, but I wanted to real quick just relate to Marquez in the moment, like keep my kids out your mouth. Like you must really want something, and I know Ken does it because Marquez is like, it's like, what are you gonna do to me? You can't outspin me. You can't whoop my ass. So what are you gonna do to me? Ken is bullying Marquez at this point, Marquez, and Trisha's facilitating it. At the end of every day and night, those are his kids. It doesn't matter who or what Ken claims. I mean, Ken can play stepdad if he likes to, but that's never gonna be, dad. That step is always gonna be a step in between you and fatherhood because those are Marquez's kids. So anyhow, I'm gonna go on ahead and get out of here before I say more of what I shouldn't say. Huh. But I need the parents to let me know what you think. The parents, the mothers, the fathers. If you were in Marquez's position, how far is too far? Because I'm not sure there's any such thing behind your kids. I'm not sure there's any such thing.